Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Travis Norvell, Chief Strategy and Engagement Officer here at Atlanta Public Schools. Excited to see who all is in the virtual room. Feel free to introduce yourself over in the chat if you'd like. I'll share kind of how we'll do this. This is our very first time doing a goals and guardrails kind of community conversation or back and forth. So we're going to try it out today, and hopefully we can learn, and feel free to share with us ways to improve it for next month and upcoming Thursdays after board meetings. So I'll walk through kind of what we were thinking for this first one, but thank you all for joining. So the purpose of these sessions are, one, to build awareness of the district's progress towards goals and guardrails, and I appreciate seeing Board Member Jones on board. This has been the work over the past year, has been intentionally focusing on student outcomes focused goals for the board. And this past Monday, we did guardrails for the first time, and I'll talk about what those look like. But one piece that we haven't really done is that next step beyond the board meeting. So it has been put into some community meetings and things like that, but what is that intentionality around community feedback in some of these areas? So we're going to try that today. Build clarity on what's happening, what's the work, and then get some ideas from you all on what we can do together to improve each one of these things. So whether it's literacy or numeracy, today we're focused on stakeholder engagement and culture and climate, and I'll kind of walk through that process for you. As we go, feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll do some pausing throughout as time allows for questions, and then also for some feedback. I'm also going to try the new whiteboard feature at Zoom to see how that works as well. And we'll just see how this goes. So for those who are not aware of goals and guardrails, this was initiated from our board, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe or Board Member Jones, but about a year ago, I think we've done maybe 11 or 12 months of board meetings related to this. And basically the top on this screen, I'm assuming y'all tell me if you can't see my screen, but the top of the screen are 4 goals, right? Literacy proficiency, numeracy proficiency, post-graduation preparedness, and college and career readiness. Each one of these things is kind of our focus areas. There's dedicated time each month to tackle one of them with whatever, and each one has a specific measure tied to it, as well as some interim goals that the district can use to see our progress towards them. Superintendents held accountable to it, boards held accountable to it. It kind of helps guide us in our work. Later I'll be able to put in, if you go to the board, Atlanta Board of Education website, they've got a section on this that has all of the reports and detailed information for each one. Also underneath are the guardrails. Those are kind of like the boundaries within which the system should work in progress towards those goals. For us, those 4 guardrails are equity, stakeholder engagement, culture and climate, and innovation and accountability. You should see some, these words are in our mission statement. So I like to think of breaking it down. Our mission statement is through a caring culture of equity, trust, and collaboration. Those are our guardrails. We will ensure every student is ready for college, career, and life. Those are our goals. So it kind of aligns directly with our mission statement as a district as well. So today, what we're going to focus on are the 2 guardrails that were shared on Monday night. That's stakeholder engagement and culture and climate. And the way I'm thinking of doing this for this conversation is to divide the hour into half. So spend the first half of the hour on stakeholder engagement, unless we finish that early, and then the second half on culture and climate, just so we can focus on one at a time. This is a uniqueness where 2 guardrails are focused on at the same time, but I think most meetings, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but most meetings is 1 goal or 1 guardrail going forward. But is that correct?
That is correct.
Cool. So for the sake of this, we'll do kind of half and half. Are there any questions, either put in the chat or you can jump off mute, related to goals and guardrails as a whole that we can try to answer? Yes, Lisa.
Hi. So I think a lot of this, and my memory could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of the discussion when the goals and guardrails were being developed happened during a time of a lot of upheaval name your upheaval in APS over the last 3 or 4 years. And I try and stay on top of a lot of meetings, but I missed a lot of these. And there's a lot of new families. So I guess one feedback I would say is going back to the genesis of this, why the board undertook this and how it relates to oversight of the district as a whole. I think that could be helpful as just kind of a level setting generally for the community and parents.
Absolutely. Great feedback, Lisa. And I did, if we get to a pause at some point, I'll look for it. We did a one-pager as well that kind of on one side talks about the why and what are goals and guardrails, and the back was the actual goals and guardrails. But good point on level setting, and hopefully we can use these meetings as well to kind of push it. But we'll think of how we can also push it out in other ways. Particularly, there's new families every single year, regardless of people, and we should be pushing it each year. So good feedback. All right. So the way we're going to do this is kind of the cadence, and I'll just go. I'm going to quickly show you my slides so that you can see kind of the cadence. We're going to kind of talk about the data, just like a board meeting. Kind of share high level the data, answer some questions if you have questions around the data, go into some of the work, here's some of the strategies that we're doing, what we plan to do, what we learned from it, and then get feedback from you all on some things that have worked, haven't worked, other ideas you have, right? The data, the work, how do we do better? And we'll do the exact same thing with culture and climate. Hopefully that works for you all. So let's start with data, and I have Joe's on the line, which I appreciate, who will be able to help answer any of the very technical questions that I get stuck with. But for stakeholder engagement, so you'll see that the guardrails have a statement, not versus a SMART goal that the goals have, but they have a statement, and then there's an interim guardrail that the administration develops to help measure that guardrail. So this guardrail is around superintendent making major decisions or recommendations to the board by implementing stakeholder engagement strategies, and lists a number of stakeholder groups. The guardrail for this is the percent of stakeholders who agree that they're involved in the decision-making process, and that number will increase. We did a 3% increase each year from 63% to 69%. The way we're measuring it right now is, and this is our first time measuring this, is basically a weighted average of for each stakeholder group gets a third of that percentage. So students a third, parents a third, staff a third. And on the bottom are how we break down parents, students, and staff for the overall number up above. So for parents, the way we gauge this is through the Georgia Parent Survey that asks a question about, am I involved in the decision-making process at our school? This increased for APS families from last year to this year by about 2 percentage points to be 75.7% agree that they're involved in the decision-making process at their schools. Now, we had a lower number of parents participate in the survey over the past couple of years because it hasn't been mandatory or required from the state. This coming year, it will be, and it will be part of the report that goes out for CCRPI. So we do expect the participation rate to go up, and we expect the district to do a lot more push around taking the survey to bring that number participation rate up. For students, we leveraged a new survey that our equity department sponsored called AMP Up, but basically trying to get to that student voice in the classroom. So the percent of students who answer favorable that school leaders and staff consider their suggestions, ideas when making decisions. That number is 44%. This was done for 6th through 12th grade students, the middle and high school students. This is our first year, so it's a baseline, and then we will increase from there, our hope. There wasn't a really great question on the Georgia Student Health Survey, which is that student version of the parent survey to get to decision making. And then the last one is staff. And this is a question about, do you agree or do you agree that you are asked for your input regarding changes that affect your work? And so that number is at 53%. It stayed level from the spring of 2022 to the spring of 2023. This is done through our employee engagement survey as one of our added questions to relate to a guardrail. So went up a couple points of parents, baseline data for students, stagnant for staff. And that kind of captures the data for stakeholder engagement. Any questions before I kind of share some of the work? Any questions on data, how it's calculated, what it means, anything that you want to dive into? And you can either raise your hand or jump off mute or put it in the chat. Yes, Lisa.
On the stat, okay, so the parents aren't mandatory, right? Students, are any of them mandatory?
No, I mean, and Joe can correct us. Mandatory is a loose term. None of this is mandatory. There are no consequences to not taking it. But we had a low percentage of parents take it. I'll look at the actual percentage. Kind of, I would say, medium amount of students take it, and we had about 77% of staff take it.
Okay, and the staff, it's anonymous for them?
Yes, completely anonymous in that Gallup holds the data from us.
Okay.
We don't even report out on groups lower than 5 people in their teams for their overall average. And we don't see who takes it or doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Joe, did you have anything to add on it?
Yeah, so when we're trying to discuss the Georgia Health Survey, there is a minimum that you need to a minimum participation rate to get what they call the climate star rating. And this is, we haven't done a climate star rating since pre-pandemic years. Going forward, that will come back, and that is all based on the Georgia surveys. There's the student version, the parent version, and the staff version. And you need a minimum participation rate for each to get that climate star rating. So while it's not, quote, required, there is a minimum participation rate to actually get a climate star rate to report on from the state. So there are some business rules around it. The last 2 years, it has not been required. This year, the state is going to do that, is going to bring back the climate star rating. So we will be looking for to meet and exceed those minimum participation rates for all those stakeholder groups going forward.
So, thanks, Joe. Ms. Cook, Sita.
Sorry, I had to unmute. I'm going to try to stick to what you're focused on, but I had various issues that I thought of after the meeting on Monday. One is that particularly for this and the climate, it needs to be set up by clusters, because I think we should disagree. We should never assume that any average for the district as a whole is useful, because there's so much variation, and that there's even variation within individuals about what they're experiencing at different times. And so that, in other words, I mean, the more I think about the whole goals and guardrails, the more complications I see in it. So I'm not going to try to go over that now. But having, in future reports like this, having more information, like how many employees were there, what percentage answered them, same thing for the parents, et cetera. Because anything, as well as, I think working by cluster is fine, although there may be a need at some point to talk about the difference between different levels, elementary, middle, and high school. So just giving more information, but not with a lot of education needs along with it. I'll stop there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Sita. I think the board, and through their coaching on students' outcomes, focus goals, governance, is trying to figure out what that balance is on data, and is it cluster level. And I know in the past we provided some cluster level. I will say for each of these data points, the administration, and I can talk heavily on the staff one because our team really does that. We have it broken down by school, employee group, cluster, generation, gender, all the different breakdowns, so that we can determine what's the best strategy to address it. But completely agree that it's the deeper you go, the more helpful it is in targeting strategies for them. I think it's trying to figure out what level that conversation has at the board level. Joe?
Yeah, I can provide some additional information. So the student outcomes focused governance monitoring reports, there's a very strict protocol how these reports are supposed to look. So this comes from the Council of Great City Schools. So for the purpose of these reports is to be district level only and not to get granular, not to get cluster or school level, but just district level. There's actually a limit on the pages. So while we have gone past that limit and actually added cluster data and some other reports, the board has been very intentional in just when they've only covered the district level results. The additional information was there for future reference, such as the business rules or appendix pages. A lot of the information, the granular information from Georgia Health Survey, that is publicly available on the Georgia Department of Education website. They actually have a dashboard by school. We have in our APS Insights, we have published a climate blog in the past that utilizes that data as well. That does allow you to get more granular as well. So while some of the more granular information may not be available in the student outcomes focused governance reports because of their purpose and the structure that has been recommended to us, that more granular information is available through publicly available sources.
Joe, that's some great feedback, and maybe as part of this conversation where we take it kind of the next level to make it more approachable, maybe we can create resources, links for people who want to dive deeper into the data, where they can go versus being stuck just with what is provided in Assembly or to the board. Sita, do you have something else to add?
Yeah, it's just quick follow-up. First, what you just said, I think makes sense. And in the report, not speaking about always acknowledging that it varies in all that way. And then the other thing is, I'll just put on the record that just because Great City Schools has a process doesn't mean we literally have to follow it in this district. That I think rethinking things as we go along is a way to make this work for APS.
Thanks for this. And hopefully these, we kind of made up this this conversation we're doing today as like a community touch point. So hopefully we can kind of build on this as well to bring it to people a little more. So so that was the data point for stakeholder engagement. I'm not going to kind of walk through all of this, but one of the ideas is to paint a picture in some of the work. And so this was shared Monday night as well, but we divided some of our strategies by the big stakeholder groups, by the data points we called out. So for families and communities this past year, we implemented some more feedback loops. So looking at intentional ways of saying, here's what we heard, this is what we did, therefore this is the recommendation. An example is that some of the work we did with some facilities. There was some more intentional work with Go teams. So Go teams met to talk about major district issues, whether it was textbooks or legislative issues, resources, things like that. And then just access and availability. So whether the engagement team coming out to board community meetings virtually or in person, or the NPU meetings that Ms. Howell helps host, just kind of being available. And we look to expand all of those things this year. I put in the link to APS Connects, which is one of those ways, is kind of just putting it all in one place as something that we're looking to do this coming year. For staff, we have advisory committees, so whether it's teacher advisory or principal advisory, different kind of counselors. And then last year we did staff specific cluster chats. We've had cluster chats where everyone's been invited, but staff haven't really had that intentional focus. And so we divided them into two separate conversations this past year, which allowed that space. And we need to do a better job of sharing kind of this year when decisions are made, what feedback, particularly from staff, was a part of that decision making. So the same feedback loop we talked about with facilities, how do we do that for any staff decisions, staff impacted decisions as well? So that's something we're looking into. And then for students, did a lot of work on expanding student voice and building culturally relevant, linguistically relevant curriculum, professional learning, as well as kind of creating more intentional roles in the district for student engagement. And we're looking at expanding it more. We heard from people, well, it should be more than the student advisory, right? It shouldn't just be the top couple kids that the principal picks. How do you expand student voice K-12? And for those whose voice is often not heard, just like when we speak about community engagement, the voices that are not heard, How do we get them? And also expand how students are involved in decision making at the district level, and doing the exact same thing I talked about with staff. How do we say, hey, this is what we heard? We started some of that with some student focus groups around profile of a graduate, student bill of rights, facilities overcrowding, and hopefully we can keep doing that this coming year on a number of topics that are going to come up for decisions. And so that's at a high level, some of the work. Ms. Howe.
Hey Travis, hey y'all, good afternoon. I heard you talk about the different committees. One thing I would like to see moving forward, everything has always been separate, like parents, students, teachers. Is it a way that you guys can create a parent teacher committee, student teacher committee where everybody is in the room asking the same questions or similar, and coming to, you know, some better conclusions or solutions, because everything has been siloed per group. It would be great to see if we could mix those groups to get some better outcome for the students.
Absolutely. Thanks, Masao. You're in our minds on a lot of these things. I know Board Member Jones is a huge proponent of cross-cluster collaboration. And so, you know, for example, we're thinking this fall, instead of doing individual state of the clusters, how do we bring a couple clusters together in a more regional approach, and then maybe even switch it up the next semester to put different clusters together. We have kind of these two tracks of groups, stakeholder groups that we engage with in a more formal way. One is a role-based group, right? So parents, teachers, students, things like that. And the other is a regional-based one, right? Go teams, cluster advisory teams on up to the district. And so thinking how we can intentionally bring the role-based groups together as well as the regional-based groups together, I think will be important. And it just also makes a more efficient use of everyone's time, because oftentimes we see the same people in these different groups. Why not just bring them all together? And so completely agree, and looking forward to seeing how we can kind of pull all those people in the same room, particularly for some big topics coming up. I know the calendar is coming up at one point this year, a few other kind of decisions. Superintendent search, how can we kind of leverage these for that conversation? So thanks, Michelle. Mr. Williams, King.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Good.
I would just like to echo back off what Waukesha and others are saying about the different groups. Around the clusters is almost like there's a disconnect from the elementary, middle, and high schools. So like bringing that voice together, I know is like trying to connect other clusters as well. But I feel like once there's a strong foundation within the clusters, like knowing, all right, well, I'm gonna matriculate from the elementary schools, I want to go to the high school because of this offering, or like making sure that that's more streamlined. I think that would be great as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Akeem. Y'all went straight into the other one, so I appreciate how we can support the guardrail. So I guess before I won't even pull up the whiteboard on this one because we jumped straight into some good feedback. But is there any other ideas that y'all have to help support stakeholder engagement, this guardrail, whether it's staff, students, families, and community as part of decision making at APS?
Hey Travis, I would say I would love to see schools get out in the community and be more interactive. You know me, we can connect on the neighborhood, MP. I would love to see the board do more community engagement, not last minute, properly noted, real, authentic communication, you know, some dialogue. I would love to see that, to get you know, feedback from the community overall.
Thanks, Waukesha. What the first part, were you saying schools get on the community, or
yeah, like you know, like in the beginning of the school year, we'll see the pictures of staff like being in the community, which is cool. But like after that, you don't really see it that often. You know what I'm saying? So like going to Camerton Road or going to Ben Hill, you know what I'm saying? So, you can see it interact. You can know firsthand what's going on in the community. So you're not shocked that, oh, this family, I 200 students and these families got to move. You know what I'm saying? Like you already know these things because you're there, and you can collaborate with your partner, whomever, to make sure the outcome is better. A lot of times the school, want to keep it school,
Thanks, Ms. Holland. I think you're cutting off towards the end, but definitely captured that. Before I kind of recap some of the feedback y'all shared on stakeholder engagement, any other ideas or thoughts on stakeholder engagement guardrail?
I have a thought or two.
community.
Go ahead.
No, I was just finna say the Go team. Y'all know me. I go to all the meetings. That is an excellent driver that can be used to get a lot of information out, to get a lot of good feedback. It's just so much happening in the city, and I think if the board members, Tamara, thank you for being on, and if the school itself, and maybe we have to have this conversation of stop loading them down with stuff so they can have real authentic relationship with their families in the community. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like I'm focused on testing, or I'm focused on I got to get this done. They have time other than field day to get in the community, get that feedback, and really know what's going on. Go ahead, Tamara. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I mean, I'm grateful for you bringing up the Go team. And Travis, I think you pointed out that, we've kind of, we've been in a state of flux, in our engagement things, pulling out of the pandemic, and we've got a lot of new students and families, to Lisa Olmstead's point. And there is an opportunity, I think, I love her term level set, especially when it comes to what these structures are that we have, like the Go teams, and I will add the cluster advisory teams as well, and really encouraging the community to come out for that. And, trying to cross-pollinate with the NPUs and getting, their participation in our cluster discussions. I continue to try to use the cluster advisory teams as an opportunity to get a feel for what's going on in, each cluster. There are some people, some families who feel like for whatever reason, they're not supposed to go to them. And I think, making them a more inclusive, open forum could be a real opportunity. So again, going back in and level setting, it's almost like rebooting or rebranding what these entities are, so that people understand that they can be used for, two-way conversations like this. So that's just my 2 cents, because again, we've got so many new families, since before the pandemic, that they didn't have the experience that we had prior to the pandemic about how those cluster conversations were going, and they were happening unevenly across the district as well. So that's mine.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it. It's we kind of talked about it on received a question from a board member about how do you increase survey participation? Well, one of the ways to increase survey participation is when people believe that the information that they're providing will be used to make change or make a decision. And so one of the other ways to make Go teams and cluster advisory teams and any of these engagement sessions beneficial and heavily attended is to show that it leads to a change or a decision. So I'm going to recap some of the stuff I heard just so I can make sure I don't miss
Travis,
it.
can I say this before you go? Tamara hit on a really important point that I want you to think about. You and Keisha, but I know this is going to be Carol department, making sure that the families, the teachers, I can't tell you how many teachers I'd be like, come to the meeting. They be like, we can't come to the meeting. I'm like, baby, this meeting for everybody. This meeting is for everybody. We want all of you guys to come. And for years, everybody has been under this impression of, oh, I'm not part of the board, I'm not on the team, this meeting is not for me. So if it's a way that we could, like Tim was just saying, make sure it's inclusive for everybody, all y'all. You know, you don't have to have kids, community members too. You pay taxes for this school system. Come in. We want to hear your support. We want to hear how you can partner and how you can help. You know, so Kat is an excellent driver. Love Kat. But families can come. You know, we got public comments. Like that's something that was really never used at the Kat meetings. You know, we got it for the Go team, but we really have a really great thing here where we can most definitely help a lot of families and get a lot of things accomplished if you know, if it's just used right. So just making sure the information is out there. Shouldn't a child be in school?
Yeah.
So that you know, we can get better outcome. Because you know, Travis, you already know, Keisha, y'all know a lot of people like, I ain't hear about it. Like, honey, we got too many vehicles to deliver the message.
So, and I don't want to cut off Sita, I'm sorry, but that is a very good point. And just to piggyback on that, you know, there is frustration I hear a lot, you know, amongst parents, amongst community members, you know, about, you know, having attended some of these meetings, they just feel like it's not for them. And, you know, I really do think that we, you know, kind of rebooting, you know, rebranding and letting people know that, yes, you are welcome. Yes, these are going to be used in this way, you know, according to this guardrail, which is that we're not going to make major decisions before we engage, and that these are opportunities for engagement. The last piece that I will say is, you know, just noticing, you know, the opportunities and considering using something that's, you know, universal, like Infinite Campus, for instance, because I got a lot of feedback from people who aren't on Twitter that, oh, I didn't know about this meeting, or they weren't at the board meeting. If we could use, you know, somebody I told about was like, well, did I get an Infinite Campus notice? And I'm like, well, I didn't either, but, you know, I don't think we've discussed using Infinite Campus as, you know, a messaging vehicle, but just to make sure that everyone knows.
Absolutely. Thanks. Sita.
Yeah, this is just a few practical things. And some of this was done in the past, is thinking about the time, the place, and having virtual when possible, maybe even some centers in different neighborhoods where people can do virtual together if they don't have the technical ability at home. But this meeting right now, however useful it would be, there's probably many people who are in 9-to-5 jobs who can't be here, who would be if it were at a different time, and childcare and food when possible.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, this past year we tried all different things to see what worked. We did hybrid. One of the things that worked for us was virtual lunch, noontime, in-person evening. So just doing it 2 times, and you can kind of pick and choose. It also allows for the virtual one to be recorded for people in the future. That one was helpful, but completely agree on time, place, as well as we'll throw in accessibility, so interpretation support as well. All right, so before I jump to culture and climate, just wanted to call out a handful of things. Level set on goals and guardrails as a whole. Ensure that we are collaborating across roles, across regions, elementary, middle, high. Get out into the community more, schools, board members, everybody, they need to see you. The conversation earlier with Sita on the data and how to dive deeper into it. And then the use of Go teams and CAT, cluster advisory teams, rebrand, they're the driver, make meeting more inclusive, get information out more accessible. And at the end of the day, stop loading schools with so much stuff that they don't have time for authentic relationships with their communities. So there's some of the highlights that I'll share with us. And as always, y'all know you can send me some more stuff. So, okay, can you still see my slides? Cool. So culture. So for our last section, culture and climate. So the word, so we'll do this the exact same way. The wording of that guardrail is the superintendent will not foster or allow a culture of fear, intimidation, or retaliation or an unwelcoming environment. The way that we're measuring it is the percent of each of those stakeholder groups who indicate that the district has a welcoming environment free of fear, intimidation, retaliation. And those numbers are from 80% to 86%. So just like the last one, we divide it into 3 groups: parents, students, and staff. So parents, again, the parents survey that Joe talked about at the beginning, that will soon have a minimum participation rate that we'll see, asks about whether they feel welcome in their student's school. That went from 89 to 90% across the district. And like he said, we can also dive deeper into individual schools as well to see kind of the heat map of that one. For students, this question is on the Georgia Student Health Survey. So this is not the equity survey, but the Georgia Student Health Survey. And it is for grades 3 through 12. First, the last one was middle and high school. This goes down to 3rd grade. And it asks if students agree that their teachers treat them with respect. And so that number went down 1 percentage point, 86 to 85%. And you also see a big decrease in participation rate from 22 to 23 on that one. And then the last one is staff. This is similar cadence as the last one. Is a question on the employee engagement. I feel free to express my thoughts, feelings, and disagreements to my supervisor. That one remains stable at 65%, but you'll see we have more employees taking the survey this year. So that's why that N number, the number underneath the percentage, goes up while the percentage stays the same. So those are the 3 kind of big buckets to get to it, to get to culture and climate for parents, students, and staff. Any questions on kind of how this data is collected or what stories it tells? And I was seeing if Lisa was still on. I was going to talk. She put a question in the chat about how the staff results get kind of pushed out and to look at it at a much more detailed or team level. But if we have time at the end, I can kind of talk a little bit about that process or get with Lisa later. All right. So here are some of the things. So just like last time, I'm going to share some things and would love some feedback from you all. So families and communities, some strategies, a lot of school-based strategies on culture and climate. So how they make their school feel warm and welcome. Think about the first person you meet when you walk into a school, what it looks like when you walk into, when you call a school, as well as just events that they have. I think Ms. Howe kind of called out some of the back to school stuff, but other things that happen throughout the year to make people want to come in. Family engagement leadership teams, which are expanding to help focus on targeted strategies for each school, as well as just communication. A lot of principals and PTAs and Go teams learning how their communities best like to receive communication and being targeted there. There's been a lot of work this past year with parent liaisons and the family engagement team to kind of strengthen some of those strategies and share them across clusters. So we'll keep expanding that as well as strengthening those family engagement teams at each school. For staff, there's a bunch of HR related stuff that we can share, some well-being initiatives, particularly employee engagement efforts. So talking about the data, sharing tips, how to have conversations. We talk about, I'm going to get the quote wrong, Ashley, but basically when we talk to teams about employee engagement scores, we say it's not about raising scores, it's about the issues the scores raise. And so it's about starting a conversation, not necessarily trying to kind of move up a certain percent. As well as we've done a lot of culture-focused leadership development recently, as well as recently as this summer's leadership retreat. One thing we're excited about staff-wise this coming year is we are refreshing our core values as a district. So COVID made all of us work a little differently and think and value things differently. And so we did a bunch of engagement to really figure out what our core values really are and how we should work. And so we're looking forward to pushing that out and sharing and re-energizing around that. Some things stay the same, like putting students in schools first and embracing and driving change, but some feel a little deeper, like every voice matters rather than just kind of commit to teamwork. It's like a deeper relationship thing that we're striving for. And then students some of the same stuff that we talked about for stakeholder engagement is also how we build culture district-wide and building staff capacity on that. As a heads up, communication wise, they're doing a lot. One of their focuses this year is lifting a lot of student highlights. So calling out the greatness in our students, aligned particularly to our profile of a graduate in other areas. So those are some of the high level strategies that we've got. What issues have the scores raised? One of the biggest issues, Board Member Jones, that we're focused on, so we ask every team when they look at their employee engagement data for them to work as a team, because engagement is not solely the manager's responsibility. Everyone plays a role in our own engagement. We ask teams to pick one thing. What is the one thing you're going to work on as a team to improve engagement and culture at the school or on that team? As a district, we are also picking one thing. We started after the last spring time frame, and our focus is on appreciation and recognition, ensuring that in the last 7 days, your supervisor or someone else at work recognizes you or praises you for doing good work. We feel like that is a number that has been low for us as a district. It is not moving the way we want it to. So we're trying to build intense. We've shared for every teacher understanding their own workplace appreciation language. So how do you like to feel appreciated? We build it into a lot of our team workshops, how people feel appreciated differently and different ways to do it. And so that's kind of one of our goals this year, is to target recognition, particularly when people are feeling burned out and other things, to be reminded why you're awesome. So any other feedback on culture and climate across any of these groups, ideas you have or questions? Awesome. I'll say one thing that we wrestle with on within some of the questions are the levels of the questions that the data gives us. We have to dive a little deeper into. So for example, there's a depth in how you answer some of these questions. With a question like, my teacher treats me with respect, that may be one level, but it's a different level of culture. The staff question about, I can go to my supervisor and talk about thoughts, feelings, things like that. And so part of it is parsing, what does that mean? What does it look like? How can we improve it? So cool. Well, so those are the 2 guardrails. What I would love to hear from y'all either now, or I'll also put my stuff in the chat, although most people probably know how to find, is how I can do a session like this better next time. So was this useful on the Thursday after a board meeting while it's kind of fresh as a topic to dive deeper? So like, for example, Joe, can you tell me next week's without me, or next month's without me clicking on the website I just put in the chat?
Yeah, Guardrail 1 equity is next month.
Equity. So for example, equity is next month, and then I believe it goes back into the goals with literacy, but and numeracy, but I could be wrong. So equity is in September. So the Thursday afterwards, I'd bring on Dr. Baker Jones, her team, to dive a little deeper and then answer questions from you all similarly as this. So here's what the data said, here's what we're doing, any feedback, any questions. Do y'all like that format? If you have ideas on how to improve it, then I'd love to hear it between now and the next one, and we'll just keep strengthening it.
And Travis, can I make one plug for our APS Insights? Well, captured audience right here. We report on many kinds of data. Perception data is just one of them, but our APS Insights, which is you can locate by going to our research and evaluation site and going to blogs or the research and evaluation briefs. We report on MAP data, Georgia milestones, CCRPI, IB, AP. We have a report on where our students are going to college and how they're matriculating. So I just want to remind everyone, those resources are out there. They're very in-depth, very detailed. And whenever I get a chance, I like to brag about them and I like to point people in that direction. And it also gives you a chance to sign up for our blog. So every time there's an update, you get a notification. So I wanted to advertise that publicly available resource that we have.
Absolutely. Great resource. It's also a great resource for if you know any families who are looking to move into an area instead of living on great schools or whatever other Yelp review exists. You can come here and see any number of data points. For example, the most recent blog is about the relationship between performance and poverty. And you can kind of geek out as much as you want and dive deeper and deeper into this. So thanks, Joe, for reminding them of APS Insights.
So I love the APS Insights, by the way, and I've gotten a couple questions on when can they expect to see the milestones, the most recent milestones information on the school profiles.
So we are working with our vendor who is doing that for us. I should have an estimate within the next couple of weeks when on that timeline.
Okay, and then the other question I've gotten is with regard to the school profiles, relative to, I see the relationship to performance and poverty, but when you go to an individual school, the direct certification numbers, it appears the most recent one is 2019, and I don't know if that's accurate. So if you go down to student populations where it says direct certification, do we know what year that was? Because some of them, okay, so if you look at enrollment, that's the 2022 school year, but then attendance up here is 2019.
Gotcha. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, yes, it does. So there are different ways of getting to economically disadvantaged data, and there are different business rules around that. So to get that, we do use the most recent data, but there are a series of different certifications. There's school-wide free and reduced lunch and district-wide, and there's also, have you been economically disadvantaged, or excuse me, have you had free or reduced lunch at any one point in time? So those business rules differ based on purpose. So because our certifications have changed, from school to school, and remember with the pandemic, some of these certifications remained in place. That has kind of skewed some of this business rule data. What is here is what is most recent. Currently, for some very specific questions, if anyone wants to email me separately, I can be very specific. I can answer very, very specific questions. I may have to research a little bit, but that data is what is the most recent that is actually available to us. And again, when we're talking about poverty, there are different ways of using free and reduced lunch applications and how you calculate that. And I'm saying that because you'll go to different resources throughout the state, and the business rules are behind that will be slightly different. They'll be similar, but slightly different. For instance, when we get our accountability reports from CCRPI in November, they will base it on what they call student records. So that's anybody who has had free and reduced lunch at some point during that school year. Now, it may not be the whole year, but at some point they were identified. They're going to go into the economically disadvantaged denominator. And that is a different business rule than you might see in some other reports. And that's just an example of why this can be a little bit confusing for people to follow.
So I think the big question, Joe, and maybe it's just making it clear on the school profiles, is the date to which the data is from. So is the assumption the direct cert, English language learner, students with disability 2022 data because that's what the other enrollment data is, or is it still 2019 data because that's what CCRPI data is? Basically, what being clear on that profile, what year it's coming from.
Yeah, because now, now 2019 was 4 years ago, and we know that things, that is starting to be a very stale number, and some of it's CCRPI that we have no control over, right? Because that's a state calculated thing. But to the extent that we can be as explicit with people as possible. And I understand that when you do the challenge index, it's not necessarily the same as the direct certification, but because direct certification means something very specific, right? But just having the date in there so that we can see what we're working with is good.
Okay. So the test scores, yes, those are based on the most current test scores. The other data, let me do some research to confirm.
Okay.
To be absolutely sure, to make sure we don't have any. Make sure that we've updated everything in the blog that needs to be updated. But I can get a confirmation on that.
Great.
But I don't have the information right in front of me, but I will get it and make it available.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. Please reach out separately over the course of the month if there's ways we can improve this going forward, and then we'll just keep kind of trying it out. And we'll put a recording of this up. The slides are already up on that APS Connects website. And I believe the next thing engagement wise is board district. Luckily, I can pull up APS Connects to see the schedule. Board District 5 community meeting is at 5:30 on the 16th. You can register from directly the APS calendar on the main website, as well as this APS Connects website. And then 2 days later is District 3 community meeting. Similarly, you can register there. There's also a link to all the Go Team meetings that are just starting or getting planned right now. And so check it out, and we appreciate everybody's participation today. Have a great day.